Alexandra Kemp, born on October 11, 1982 in Leawood, Kansas, a city with a population of just over 30,000 people, was raised in one of the most affluent suburbs in the Kansas City metropolitan area. Known as Allie to her friends and family, she resided there with her parents and two brothers. From a young age, Allie displayed remarkable energy and enthusiasm, actively participating in 19 different sports teams and engaging in various extracurricular activities throughout her school years. Soccer was her true passion, and she excelled both on the field and in her academic pursuits. Upon graduating from high school in 2001, pursued her dream of studying ecology at Kansas State University. Her desire to make a positive impact on others motivated her career choice. Allie even had plans to travel to Russia as part of an exchange program assist orphan children. In 2002, after completing her freshman year of college, 19-year-old Allie returned home for the summer break. She sought a part-time job and cherished the opportunity to spend quality time with her loved ones before resuming her studies. Reuniting with her long-term boyfriend Phil brought her immense joy. Although they had chosen different universities after high school, they managed to sustain their relationship despite the distance, with summer breaks being their only chance to be together. Allie and Phil were fortunate enough to secure employment at the local public pool, and Allie's younger brother also joined them. Their work schedules were arranged consecutively, with Phil working mornings, Allie during the day, and her brother in the evenings. On Thursday, June 18th, Allie arrived for her shift, relieving Phil. Initially, she contemplated asking him to stay a little longer, but ultimately decided against it as they had plans for a date later in the evening. The day was rather gloomy, resulting in fewer visitors at the pool. Allie occupied herself at her desk, engrossed in a book, eagerly awaiting the end of her workday. As evening approached, her younger brother arrived at the pool to commence his shift. To his surprise, Allie was nowhere to be found. Allie's phone, keys, and personal belongings were left unattended on the table, but Allie herself was nowhere to be found. After thoroughly searching the area, he made the decision to contact their parents. Their father, Roger Kemp, hurried over, growing increasingly concerned as the situation seemed peculiar. He knew that Allie wouldn't simply abandon her belongings, including her phone, and leave work early. Roger meticulously combed through the entire area, meticulously checking every nook and cranny. Eventually, he arrived at the pump room. The room was enveloped in darkness, and initially he didn't notice anything suspicious. However, as he was about to depart, something caught his attention. In the corner, there was a blue tarp spread out, and a foot was protruding from beneath it. His heart sank as he approached, realizing that it was his daughter lying beneath the tarp. Allie was covered in blood and bruises, showing no signs of life. Additionally, her shorts and underwear were missing. Roger promptly dialed for an ambulance, but unfortunately the doctors were unable to save her. She passed away shortly after being admitted to the hospital. Medical experts determined that Allie had sustained a severe head injury, and the cause of death was strangulation. They also discovered numerous defensive wounds indicating that Allie had fought back against her attacker. The police initiated an investigation and swiftly uncovered the first piece of evidence. There was an open first aid kit with a pill container on the floor of the pump room, near where the victim was discovered. It was sent to the laboratory, where experts found male DNA on the container and its lid. Biological samples were also found on Allie's clothing. After comparing all of these samples, experts concluded that they belonged to the same man, although he was not in the FBI database. The police commenced their search for potential suspects, beginning with Allie's boyfriend. Given the brutality of the assault, investigators considered the possibility that the assailant may have had personal motives. According to Phil, after his shift, he went to visit friends and his alibi was corroborated by multiple individuals. In addition, he also provided his DNA sample, which did not match the perpetrators. The same was true for Allie's father and brother, as they both promptly provided their samples as well. Roger was overwhelmed with grief and spent the entire night at the morgue, refusing to leave Allie's side. The following day, he delivered a heartfelt speech to the gathered city residents, expressing his gratitude for their condolences and vowing to find his daughter's killer at any cost. The news of the murder quickly spread throughout the community, shocking the locals who were unaccustomed to such heinous crimes. Consequently, the police received an abundance of tips, and almost immediately they obtained their first lead. Several individuals who had been at the pool reported seeing a suspicious man lurking around the area the day before the murder, observing them from behind bushes and even filming them. Other witnesses mentioned spotting a man with a similar appearance driving a beige Ford pickup truck in the pool parking lot. None of them recognized the individual, making it unlikely that he was a visitor. Phil provided an additional intriguing detail. Allie had confided in him that she sometimes felt uneasy working alone, sensing that someone was watching her. Although she did not specify if she had seen anyone suspicious near the pool, the accounts of other witnesses suggested that it could have been the same man. Another lead emerged from Allie's friend, Laurel. On the day of the murder, Allie had called Laurel around 3 p.m., expressing her boredom. In response, Laurel decided to drive to the pool to keep her company. When she arrived, she honked her car horn multiple times, expecting Allie to come out and meet her. However, instead of Allie, a man emerged from the pump room and waved at Laurel. Assuming he was Allie's boss, Laurel believed that her presence might cause trouble for her friend and chose to leave. Detectives found Laurel's account significant as they believed this man to be the likely killer. Based on her testimony, they created a composite sketch of the suspect, which was subsequently distributed to local newspapers and TV channels. Phil took the initiative to launch a flyer distribution campaign featuring the composite sketch and a detailed description of the suspect. With the assistance of his companions and a multitude of volunteers, thousands of flyers were distributed throughout the town. Despite these extensive efforts, the authorities were still unable to apprehend the culprit. In an attempt to gather information, Roger also managed to raise $50,000 as a reward for any leads that could lead to the capture of the murderer. Unfortunately, this endeavor did not yield any fruitful results. However, a stroke of inspiration struck Roger later on. He conceived the idea of erecting a billboard along the busy highway he frequently traveled to work, featuring a composite sketch of the suspect. After discussing this idea with the police, they expressed their support. Nevertheless, they informed him that their department lacked the funds to rent a billboard, leaving Roger responsible for covering all the expenses. Roger reached out to a billboard rental company to inquire about the cost. Upon learning about his daughter's tragic murder, they generously offered to provide the billboard free of charge, driven by their desire to assist in solving the case. Allie's father, taken aback by this unexpected turn of events, gratefully accepted their offer. Collaborating with the police, they designed a banner showcasing the composite sketch, the suspect's description, and details regarding the $50,000 reward. Once the billboard was erected, the police began receiving a substantial influx of tips, surpassing 1,000 within a few weeks. Each lead was meticulously investigated, leading them to stumble upon some intriguing leads. One tip pointed towards a local resident named James Strader, who bore a resemblance to the composite sketch. Detectives promptly approached him for questioning, but Strader provided an alibi, claiming he was at work during the time of the murder. His boss corroborated his statement, temporarily eliminating him as a suspect. However, another tip regarding Strader surfaced, revealing that he owned the same type of vehicle as the suspect. The plot thickened as the police discovered that Strader was wanted in 2 states for a series of crimes, including 3 sexual assaults and 2 kidnappings, all allegedly committed within a span of 3 weeks. Shockingly, he had assaulted his ex-girlfriend and coerced her into accompanying him in search of a new victim. Soon after, he ceased his actions and made an attempt to unlawfully enter someone's residence in order to steal money. Coincidentally, during that very moment, a 14-year-old girl happened to be passing by. Strader, using threats, coerced her into his vehicle. He then proceeded to drive to a secluded area where he assaulted both the girl and his ex-girlfriend. After leaving them stranded, departed from the scene. Later on, he approached another woman's home and claimed that his car had broken down. When she opened the door, Strader brandished a knife, forcefully entered the house and assaulted her. Subsequently, he abducted the woman and transported her to a different town. However, she managed to escape from his clutches. Eventually, Strader was apprehended in Utah. He had pulled into a gas station and fled without paying, prompting the staff to contact the police. Shortly after, a police officer noticed his vehicle, pulled him over, ran his identification, and discovered that he was wanted for kidnappings and assaults. While conversing with the officer, Strader displayed a smirk and suggested that he should be handcuffed. In relation to Ali's case, investigators promptly reached out to their counterparts in another state requesting a DNA sample from Strader. However, upon completion of the analysis, the detectives were faced with an unexpected twist. Strader's DNA did not match the sample found on Ali's clothing or the pill bottle. Eventually, Strader was sentenced to life imprisonment for his other crimes, while the detectives persisted in their search for Ali's murderer. Despite months of little progress, in the autumn of 2004, the detectives received an intriguing tip. An individual contacted the police stating that the composite sketch resembled someone they knew, a man named Teddy Hoover. Upon investigating Hoover, the police discovered that he resided in Kansas City and was employed by a pool maintenance company. Furthermore, his name appeared in the case files. Hoover had been questioned alongside others but had not aroused any suspicions. Investigators proceeded to visit his residence and inquire about Ali's murder. Hoover professed that he could barely recall his whereabouts on that specific day, considering it had been 2 years. The officers requested his DNA sample, but Teddy declined, stating he needed to consult with his attorney first. Law enforcement did not hastily eliminate him as a suspect, yet they lacked any proof linking him to the crime. Subsequently, they opted to have another conversation with him, but encountered an issue. Teddy, along with his girlfriend, had vanished without a trace, and their current location remained unknown. A month later, the police received a tip from an anonymous source, revealing that Teddy and his girlfriend had relocated to Connecticut, more than 1,000 miles away from Kansas City. This raised suspicions. Teddy had relocated across the country right after the police began showing interest in him. The detectives contacted the state's postal service to trace Teddy's new address through them, but they found no information about him. They then requested the same for his girlfriend's name, and this time they struck gold. The woman was receiving mail at an address in the small town of Bantam. However, there was a peculiar detail. A man named Benjamin Appleby was also receiving mail at the same address. Upon investigating this name, they discovered that this individual had an extensive criminal history, including robberies and assaults. Intriguingly, Teddy Hoover also had convictions for similar offenses, including an outstanding arrest warrant for public indecency. Detectives began to suspect that something was amiss. According to the postman who regularly delivered letters to Teddy's girlfriend's address, he only ever saw 2 individuals in the residence. Based on his descriptions, Appleby bore a striking resemblance to Hoover. The police once again sought assistance from their counterparts in Connecticut. Upon visiting the house, they confirmed that Teddy Hoover did indeed reside there, leading to his arrest on the public indecency warrant. In the meantime, the detectives assigned to Ali's case had arrived in Connecticut and were making preparations for the upcoming interrogation. They meticulously arranged an investigation board displaying photographs of the victim, Teddy, as well as images from the crime scene in the hopes that it would elicit a confession from Teddy. As soon as Teddy entered the room, he immediately became apprehensive upon seeing the display. Without much delay, he admitted that his true identity was Benjamin Appleby and that Teddy Hoover was the name he had assumed to evade capture, in honor of his deceased friend. Initially, Teddy vehemently denied any involvement in Ali's murder, but his resistance was short-lived. Merely 10 minutes into the questioning, he began to divulge information. According to Benjamin, on that fateful day, he had gone to the pool to meet with the manager and propose his company's cleaning services. It was during this encounter that he noticed Ali and was instantly captivated by her. Finding her in the pump room, Benjamin approached her, attempting to strike up a conversation. Although Ali responded politely to his compliments, it was evident that she was not interested. Undeterred, Benjamin persisted in showering her with compliments, but Ali remained uninterested and attempted to leave. In a desperate attempt to prevent her departure, Benjamin blocked the door with his hand and made an unwelcome advance towards her. When Ali pushed him away, he flew into a fit of rage and began assaulting her, repeatedly striking her. He proceeded to remove her clothing with the intention of sexually assaulting her. However, upon hearing a car horn outside, he decided to strangle her instead. After concealing her body with a tarp, he ventured outside and noticed Ali's friend, Laurel, sitting in her car. Benjamin waved at her, and she drove away, oblivious to the horrific events that had just unfolded. Subsequently, Benjamin left the crime scene as well. Sometime later, he made the ill-fated decision to return, only to arrive just as the medics were removing Ali's lifeless body from the pump room. It was at this point that the police questioned him, but he managed to avoid arousing any suspicion. Benjamin claimed to be unaware of the motive behind his heinous act and expressed remorse for his actions. He also confessed that he had developed genuine feelings for Ali, and when she rejected him, he lost control of himself. Following his confession, investigators promptly sent his DNA sample to the laboratory, where it was found to match the samples obtained. When questioned about why he took the pills, Benjamin claimed he was searching for a lubricant in the first aid kit. Following his arrest, he enlisted a lawyer who attempted to retract his confession, despite Benjamin's earlier reluctance to subject the victim's family to a trial. Nevertheless, with his DNA discovered on the victim's garments, the likelihood of evading punishment was slim. During the trial, his legal representative contended that the murder was accidental, yet failed to substantiate such a dubious account of events. In 2005, Benjamin was convicted and sentenced to a minimum of 50 years in prison, rendering him ineligible for release until 2054, with no certainty even then. Given his age of 29 at the time of sentencing, it was probable that he would spend the remainder of his life incarcerated. Subsequently, Benjamin has made numerous unsuccessful attempts to appeal his sentence, each one adding to the burden on Ali's family. Her father has made every effort to prevent his daughter's killer from being set free. In memory of Ali, her parents initiated self-defense classes for women, which garnered significant attention and trained tens of thousands of women. Ali's father was even honored with a visit to the White House by Barack Obama, who commended him for organizing the self-defense classes and emphasized their significance. Additionally, Roger was recognized for his innovative idea of displaying information about wanted criminals on billboards, a method that proved to be highly effective and previously unexplored. On May 29, 2005, 18-year-old Natalie Holloway embarked on a mission to create lasting memories on her final day in Aruba. Unfortunately, what was meant to be the most perfect date of her life quickly transformed into a nightmarish ordeal when she mysteriously vanished from the vibrant Caribbean islands. Born on October 21, 1986, in Clinton, Mississippi, Natalie later relocated to Mountain Brook, Alabama. She was the eldest of two siblings with a younger brother named Matthew. Natalie grew up in a tight-knit and affectionate family. Her parents, Beth Holloway and David Holloway, were high school sweethearts who tied the knot in the 1980s. However, their differences eventually led to their separation in 1993 after 13 years of marriage. Beth Holloway took on the responsibility of raising their two children single-handedly and did an exceptional job. In 2000, she married George Jug Twitty, an Alabama businessman, and moved with her children to Mountain Brook, Alabama. Despite the divorce, David remained a pillar of support for his family, ensuring that his children never felt abandoned. Natalie flourished in a nurturing and encouraging environment, excelling academically. She attended Mountain Brook High School in Birmingham, Alabama, where she was recognized as an honor student actively involved in various extracurricular activities. As the academic prodigy of the Holloway family, Natalie desired to embark on a graduation trip with her friends before commencing college. Although initially hesitant, her parents eventually agreed, witnessing their daughter's remarkable achievements. Natalie had aspirations of pursuing a pre-med degree at the University of Alabama, courtesy of a full scholarship. Prior to her college journey, she was determined to make the most of this trip and was filled with anticipation. On May 26, 2005, Natalie, accompanied by her 125 classmates and 7 chaperones from Mountain Brook High, arrived on the picturesque Caribbean island of Aruba. Once they arrived at the Holiday Inn, all of them decided to stay. The students were given the freedom to enjoy themselves without any supervision. Natalie and her friends spent the next few days soaking up the sun, snorkeling and partying at the local clubs and bars until the early hours of the morning. This was Natalie's first taste of independence, and being of legal drinking age, it worked to her advantage. The group frequently visited popular spots like Carlos and Charlie's nightclub and the Excelsior Casino, both conveniently connected to the Holiday Inn. On May 29, 2005, the final day of their trip to Aruba, Natalie and her friends were at the casino near the blackjack table when a Dutch stranger approached them. He introduced himself as Joran van der Sloot, a student around the same age as Natalie, who was also visiting from Holland and staying nearby. They hit it off and engaged in conversation. Natalie and her friends planned to go to Carlos and Charlie's, so they invited Joran to join them. Just before closing time, Joran arrived at the club and took Natalie to the back bar to buy her a few drinks. Unbeknownst to Natalie, her drink was spiked with a substance known as Liquid X, which is odorless and colorless. This substance is commonly used by attackers to sedate their victims before taking advantage of them. Liquid X only requires a few drops to take effect. The bartender seemed to recognize Joran, which was unusual, but Natalie didn't pay much attention to it. The drug soon began to affect Natalie, and she quickly became intoxicated. Joran fabricated a story about sharks near the lighthouse and convinced Natalie to accompany him to the beach. Joran arranged for his friend's car to be waiting outside the club for him. He guided Natalie to the back seat of a silver-gray Honda driven by Deepak while Satish Kalpo sat in the front seat. Natalie's friends watched as she left with an unfamiliar Dutchman, paying no attention to their concerns. Little did they know this would be the last time anyone would see her. On May 30th, 2005, when the students from Mountain Brook High School were preparing to board their plane back home, Natalie was nowhere to be found. The first call was made to Beth Holloway, informing her that her daughter was missing and had missed her flight. Filled with fear, Beth boarded a private jet owned by a friend and arrived in Aruba within 12 hours. She immediately went to the local police station where Natalie's disappearance had been reported and urged them to initiate an investigation. Beth insisted on reviewing the security tapes from the previous night, accompanied by the casino manager. It was then that she discovered her daughter leaving the club with Joran. Inquiring about Joran, she learned that he was a regular at the casino and had connections throughout Aruba's gambling establishments. Joran was known for his reckless behavior involving gambling, drugs, and engaging in suspicious activities. Despite living in his family's estate, he resided in his own private guest house. Further investigation into his background revealed a disturbing pattern. Joran allegedly targeted women on their last night in Aruba. He would isolate them from their friends, drug them, and then subject them to physical assault in his guest house, showing no remorse. Joran had faced multiple accusations of aggravated assault, with victims claiming he took advantage of them while they were under the influence of drugs. However, none of these allegations resulted in any consequences for him. He had meticulously planned his actions, leaving no trace back to himself. Finally, around 3 a.m. the next day, Beth managed to convince the police to accompany her to the Vandersloot residence. There she was met by Paul Vandersloot, Joran's father, who immediately denied any involvement of his son in the case. Joran swiftly joined the conversation, accompanied by his friends Deepak and Satish. When Beth confronted them about Natalie being last seen with Joran at the bar, he claimed that they had only gone for a few drinks and later dropped her off at the hotel. Paul, being a judicial official in Aruba, immediately intervened and instructed his son to cease any further interaction. This professional background provided Joran with a shield, allowing him enough time to eliminate any incriminating evidence. Unfortunately, the police offered little assistance, leaving Beth with no choice but to return to the station. The hotel's CCTV footage contradicted Joran's claims, as none of the cameras captured Natalie being dropped off at the inn. The following morning, David Holloway arrived in Aruba, desperate to locate his missing daughter. Despite 48 hours having passed since Natalie's disappearance, police seemed hesitant to believe Joran's involvement in the case. The assigned officers repeatedly assured Beth that her daughter would reappear at any moment. Meanwhile, they began speculating that Natalie may have been under the influence of drugs or had simply run away. With mounting desperation, David Holloway organized a ground search with more friends and family members joining them in Aruba. As news of Natalie's disappearance reached a local media channel in Alabama, news crews and reporters flooded the island. Every news outlet, magazine, and newspaper featured Natalie on their front pages. Prominent channels such as the New York Times conducted extensive interviews with Beth Holloway, further raising public awareness of Natalie's situation. David received calls from other families who had experienced similar incidents of their daughters going missing in Aruba. However, they were advised to abandon these cases due to the lack of leads. As public pressure intensified, the investigating officers brought in Joran and the Kalpo brothers for questioning. During the initial interrogation by Araban authorities, Joran, Vandersloot, and the Kalpo brothers, Deepak and Satish, claimed that they had taken Natalie Holloway to California Lighthouse near Ayrshire Beach on the northwest tip of the island to observe sharks. According to their statement, they dropped her off at the hotel around 2 a.m. on the morning of May 30th, 2005. Subsequently, on June 5th, 2 former hotel security guards were arrested after Joran and the Kalpo brothers alleged that they had witnessed the guards approaching Natalie outside the hotel before driving away. The young men themselves were apprehended on June 9th and detained on potential charges of first or second-degree murder and kidnapping resulting in death. Aruban Attorney General Karen Jansen clarified that the authorities had hoped that one of the suspects would provide conclusive evidence, which is why they were not immediately taken into custody. On June 14th, the beach was thoroughly searched, followed by a search of Duran's residence the next day, during which investigators confiscated 2 vehicles, computers, and cameras. While some citizens criticized the delayed response of the Aruban authorities, others argued that it aided in the accumulation of circumstantial evidence. The security guards were subsequently released on June 18th, and one of them informed the police that a Kalpo brother had confided in him while they were both incarcerated. The guard revealed that the brothers had not taken Natalie to the hotel, but had instead left her with Joran at a beach near the hotel. Paul Vandersloot, Joran's father, was also questioned by the police and arrested on June 22nd. Additionally, reports emerged regarding the arrest of Steve Gregory Crows, a DJ on a party boat who may have had some connection to the case. Both Crows and Paul were released on June 26th. Sutish Kalpo admitted to providing false information to the police during his initial trial and subsequently altered his statement, claiming that he and Deepak had indeed dropped off Joran and Natalie at the hotel, and that was the last they had seen of them. In the meantime, a gardener at the Aruba Racket Club provided a sworn statement to the police, stating that he witnessed all three men in a car near the club around 2:30 a.m., contradicting the Kalpoya's claim that they were already home. As each statement emerged, the case became more convoluted, and there were still no signs of Natalie. Despite the exhaustive efforts of the Aruban Police Department, Dutch Marines, Federal Bureau of Investigation agents, and numerous locals who meticulously searched every inch of the land, no evidence was found. However, a volunteer group took matters into their own hands and dispatched divers and sonar equipment on June 25th, hoping to uncover any clues. It wasn't until 6 weeks after Natalie's disappearance that her family decided to offer a reward of $200,000 for her safe return, with an additional $100,000 reward for any information leading to the resolution of the case. By the end of July, the reward was increased to $1 million if Natalie returned home alive. Beth remained in Aruba for a total of 2 months, departing just a few weeks before the Kalpos, who had been previously released on July 4th, were rearrested on August 26th. However, the brothers in Iran were all released again by September 3rd. In late August, divers from the Aruba Search Team and Rescue Foundation conducted another search after receiving a tip about human bones detected by a radar machine approximately a mile off the coast. Unfortunately, their efforts yielded no results. In March 2006, 10 months after Natalie's disappearance, Ereban authorities revealed that witnesses had informed them about her heavy drinking and possession of drugs that night, although no one claimed to have seen her consuming any substances. Deputy Chief of Police Gerald Dompig stated, "We strongly believe that she may have gone into shock or experienced some adverse reaction due to the combination of alcohol and possibly other drugs, either voluntarily taken or administered to her, resulting in her collapse." With the belief that she had passed away, the search teams focused their efforts on the beach, where Joran claimed to have last seen her, as well as a nearby salt pond in search of forensic evidence. Throughout this time, Joran's account of events continued to change. He found the media attention he received quite intriguing and cleverly used it to his advantage. Joran frequently contacted news channels, claiming to have new evidence related to the case in order to extort money to fuel his gambling addiction. Joran Vandersloot was born on August 6, 1987 in Arnhem, Netherlands, to parents Paulus Vandersloot and Anita Vandersloot-Hugen. He was recognized as an honor student and a star athlete at the International School of Aruba. His father, an attorney, was in the process of becoming a judge when Natalie Holloway disappeared. Watson, one of Natalie's close friends, recalled her first encounter with Joran. "I remember he's really tall. I remember looking at him thinking, 'Oh, who's that guy? You know, he's hanging out with my friends,'" she continued. "I wasn't really suspicious. I mean, he's gonna come out with us later." Joran was easily identified by Holiday and staff as a regular who targeted young female tourists. He spent 3 months in jail, but was released without any charges. A judge determined that there was insufficient evidence to keep him detained. Towards the end of 2007, he and the Kalpo brothers were arrested again, but once more, they were released without any consequences. Joran traveled freely around the world, residing in Thailand for a brief period. Engaging in suspicious activities, he managed to evade capture. He frequently discussed the case, seemingly enjoying the fame it brought him, but his temper was quick to flare. During a sit-down interview with Dutch crime reporter Peter de Vries in January 2008, he threw a glass of wine in Peter's face when questioned about his credibility. In November 2008, CNN reported that Arabian authorities had 2 new leads to pursue. Initially, a witness came forward claiming to have seen Paul Vandersloot on the night of May 29, 2005. He informed the authorities that he was at home sleeping at 7 a.m. on the night in question, while his son was near a pond on the island at 4 a.m. on May 30, 2005. According to the witness, a young man, soaked from the waist down and wearing only one shoe, was seen running from the pond towards a fast food restaurant. Shortly after, an older man in a red Jeep accompanied the young man, passing by about 10 minutes later. Another tip came from Joran's ex-girlfriend, who claimed that he had once said to her, "You never know. You might be on the beach with someone who can dispose of a body." In their quest to find Natalie, the family enlisted the help of private investigator Tim Miller, who spent nearly a year going door to door in Aruba, often accompanied by David Holloway. On Natalie's birthday, October 21st, 2005, they even searched the landfills in Aruba, digging through the garbage in hopes of finding any clues. However, it was the deputy police chief who suggested that they shift their search to the sea, as a fisherman's hut had recently been broken into and items such as a fish trap and tools that could be used to weigh down a body were stolen. Entrepreneur Louis Schaefer, who had been closely following the case, offered to finance an expedition to search the ocean floor within a specific radius. In November 2007, a boat named Persistence set sail for Aruba. On December 24th, they discovered what appeared to be a fishing trap approximately 90 feet below the surface. 5 days later, on December 29th, they deployed a remote-operated vehicle to investigate further and spotted what seemed to be a skull. On December 30th, a diver from the boat joined 2 Aruban police divers, but unfortunately they did not find anything related to Natalie. Despite numerous leads and witnesses emerging from time to time, they all ultimately led to dead ends. In the early months of 2008, David received a message from someone named Marcos, who claimed to have insider information regarding Natalie's disappearance. According to Marcos, drug runners had been paid to dispose of Natalie's body at sea, but instead they took her remains to Nicaragua and concealed them on land. Intrigued by this revelation, David traveled to Nicaragua to meet with Marcos in person. Marcos offered to accompany David to the hiding spot using a GPS tracker to search for Natalie's remains. According to official reports, Marcos contacted David later, claiming to have found Natalie. He described her wrapped in a blanket, but unfortunately her body had decomposed. Marcos insisted that they had to place her in 2 ice chests. After this incident, Marcos vanished without a trace, never to be heard from again. In February 2010, Paul Wandersloot, Joran's father, unexpectedly passed away from a heart attack, leaving Joran in a state of uncertainty. In March of the same year, Joran reached out to John Kelly, Holloway family's attorney, using the pseudonym J.P. Sanders. In a desperate plea, Joran claimed to know the whereabouts of Natalie Holloway. Joran's email expressed his desire to come clean, stating that his father's death had removed any reason for him to hide the truth. He offered to assist Natalie's family, but requested a substantial sum of $250,000 in return. Joran proposed that he would disclose what happened to Natalie and where she could be found, allowing Beth to bring her home. After receiving Beth's permission, John Kelly arranged a meeting with Joran and Aruba, agreeing to provide an initial payment of $25,000. During their meeting, Joran asserted that he knew the location of Natalie's body. When John inquired about the consequences if they didn't pay him, Joran callously replied that Beth could wait another 5 years without any remorse. Faced with this distressing situation, the Holloway family sought assistance from the Federal Bureau of Investigation. They devised a plan to trick Joran into believing he would receive payment, intending to catch him engaging in wire fraud. This would, at the very least, provide legal grounds to detain him. John and Joran crossed paths once again, and this time John transferred a total of $25,000 to him. Upon receiving the payment, Joran guided John to a house near Aruba Racket Club, where he claimed to have hidden Natalie's remains in a freshly poured foundation before the house was constructed. Joran alleged that he had been with Natalie on the beach that night. According to his account, he wanted to leave, but Natalie resisted, leading to a heated argument. In a fit of anger, he pushed her, causing her to hit her head and lose a significant amount of blood, resulting in her immediate death. John remained skeptical about the overall credibility of Joran's story, but it turned out that Joran initially concealed the body on the beach with his father's assistance before burying her elsewhere. The house Joran led John to had not undergone any construction since 2010. Authorities deemed Joran's account insufficiently credible to issue an arrest warrant. Both John and Joran stayed in contact until May 25th, with Joran claiming he would surrender himself. However, instead of doing so, he fled to Peru with the extorted money. On June 30th, 2010, a federal grand jury indicted Joran on charges of wire fraud and extortion. Upon arriving in Peru, Joran reverted to his previous behavior. He approached 21-year-old college student Stephanie Flores at the Atlantic City Casino in Lima, Peru. Surveillance footage revealed that they played poker together for approximately 1 to 2 hours. Subsequently, Stephanie exchanged some chips for cash and accompanied Joran to the TAC hotel, where he collected his room key from the front desk. At around 5:33 a.m., they were last seen ascending the stairs before entering room 309. On May 30th, 2010, at 8:36 a.m., Uran was observed locked out of his room. Contacted the front desk for assistance. 20 minutes later, he left alone, carrying only a backpack. The television in the room remained on and he instructed the clerk, "Don't disturb my girl," before departing. 2 days later, hotel staff discovered Stephanie's severely beaten body inside room 309. Stephanie's father, Ricardo Flores, was a well-known entrepreneur and former professional race car driver, which undoubtedly attracted significant attention from the local media. Joran, on the other hand, fled to the south and was eventually apprehended in Chile. He made every effort to alter his appearance, shaving his head and dyeing his hair blonde as well as discarding most of his clothing. However, Joran chose to keep his laptop, refusing to part with it. Initially, Joran vehemently proclaimed his innocence to the Lima police, but after 4 days in custody, he finally broke down and confessed to the murder of Stephanie. According to his account, they had gone up to his room to engage in some online gambling. During a brief absence, Joran returned to find Stephanie going through his laptop, discovering information related to Natalie's disappearance. This discovery caused Stephanie to panic and attempt to leave the room, further enraging Joran, ultimately leading to her tragic demise. Stephanie suffered a broken neck and was likely paralyzed minutes before her death. The subsequent autopsy revealed that she was conscious when Joran placed her lifeless body on the floor and briefly left to take a shower. Upon realizing that Stephanie was still alive, he used his shirt to strangle her. Before fleeing the scene, Joran committed one final act of disrespect by positioning Stephanie's deceased body in a suggestive manner before departing. The entire population of the United States was shaken by this event, as history seemed to be repeating itself with another victim, 5 years later on the very same day. Beth Holloway, Natalie's mother, was devastated and finally, Uran faced trial. He was charged with first-degree murder and robbery in Peru, in addition to wire fraud and extortion, as suggested by the U.S. Attorney's Office in Birmingham, Alabama. The defense argued that the crime should be classified as manslaughter, citing Uran's severe psychological trauma resulting from the Natalie Holloway case. However, Uran ultimately pleaded guilty to the murder charges. The court handed Uran a 28-and-a-half-year prison sentence in 2012, marking a significant victory for the Holloway family after enduring years of trauma. Beth Holloway made a trip to Peru to visit Uran at Castro prison in September 2010, where a Dutch documentary crew shed light on his life in one of the world's harshest cells. Beth expressed a sense of liberation, stating Joran was incarcerated, and this is what I had been striving for over the past 5 years. This was my goal all along. Joran's imprisonment served as a pivotal moment for the families of the victims, allowing them to finally progress with their lives. In July 2014, Joran was preparing to marry his pregnant Peruvian girlfriend, Lydie Figueroa. Lydie revealed to CBS that she met Joran in 2010 during a visit to another inmate with her cousin. Conjugal visits were permitted at Piedras Gordas, the maximum security prison in northern Lima, where Joran spent his initial years before being moved from Miguel Castro. According to Lydie, her partner had undergone a significant transformation. In August, Joran was relocated to the more isolated Calapeca prison in the Andes Mountains due to an alleged threat against the warden at Piedras Gordas. Lydie, who gave birth to a daughter in September, claimed that Joran was attacked by a fellow inmate at Calapeca. However, these accusations were refuted by the director of the Peru National Penitentiary Institute, who labeled her a compulsive liar in an interview. In 2015, Lydie shared a letter from Uran with Fox News Latino in which he claimed that Stephanie's father had placed a $10,000 bounty on his head. Expressing fear for his life, Uran urged authorities to ensure his safety in prison. By this point, legal authorities and the media had already identified him as a compulsive liar and a sociopath. Uran's lack of remorse, guilt, or fear combined with the severity of his crime further solidified the deception of his lies. In June 2023, Uran was extradited to Birmingham to face federal charges of extortion to which he pleaded not guilty. However, in October, he altered his statement and admitted to killing Natalie as part of a plea deal. This resulted in a 20-year prison sentence for extortion and wire fraud, which would run concurrently with his existing term in Peru. Finally, Uran confessed to the horrifying events of May 29, 2005. On the night of Natalie's disappearance, the Calpo brothers left them at the beach after Natalie fell ill. Uran revealed that Natalie had briefly kissed him, but when he made further advances, She fought back and kneed him in self-defense. In a fit of anger, Joran kicked her in the head and then used a cinder block to dispose of her body by dragging her into the ocean. The statute of limitations for murder charges in Aruba is 12 years, and the island's prosecutors have requested access to Joran Vandersloot's files from the U.S. Justice Department before deciding on their next steps. Natalee Holloway's case remains open in Aruba and has become one of the most well-known missing person cases in the U.S. The loss of a family member in a foreign country and the horrifying details of the story have brought forth numerous questions about the actions of both the Arabian Police Department and those associated with Joran. Each individual involved played a role in the tragic disappearance of 18-year-old Natalee, a beloved daughter and promising medical student, whose life was cut short due to negligence. This particular case has sparked outrage and raised concerns about our community's law enforcement and media. The plea of a mother in distress resonated throughout the nation in silence. Yet as of 2024, Natalee's location remains a mystery with no clear path to justice in sight. Mansfield, a fascinating and historic market town in Nottinghamshire in the UK. With gorgeous architecture and a remarkable history, there really is plenty to do and see here. One of the people that called this place home was 18-year-old Liam Gray. Liam had been born into a loving family and was one of 4 children, having 3 siblings, Paige, Madison, and Freddie. Liam was popular and well-loved by those who knew him, with his mother Jo and describing him as happy-go-lucky. He loved to make people laugh and have fun, never taking himself too seriously. He was a passionate supporter of his beloved Liverpool Football Club, and one of his former teachers said he had a heart of gold and always looked out for and cared for other people. He was also close to his grandfather John, affectionately known as Pops, and Liam would move in with him when he was in his teens, after having a tough time at school. He had a close group of friends and an especially close bond with Reese, his best friend. The pair were as close as brothers and spent most of their time together, with Madison calling them inseparable. They had grown up together and gone to the same schools, and their friendship had gone from strength to strength. Reese lived across the road from Liam and Pops, and Reese was equally close to Pops, saying he would be lost without him. Liam and his grandfather lived on Gladstone Street, and after moving, Liam introduced Reese to one of his other friends, Jonathan Treadgold. 17-year-old Jonathan's early life had been troubled and he had spent various times in the care of social services, following drug use and domestic violence in the family home. He was also having run-ins with the law from the age of 14, with a criminal record including threatening behavior and criminal damage. Liam, being the caring young man he was, decided to take Jonathan under his wing and try and be there for him as a friend and a support system. He recognized that Jonathan had various struggles and wanted to help him turn his life around. Joan wasn't too sure though. She said there was just something about Jonathan that bothered her, and she wasn't keen on her son hanging around with him. Liam's sister had also heard things about Jonathan and his behavior, but she was prepared to put that aside, give him a chance and judge for herself what he was like. Liam invited Jonathan to hang out with him, on one occasion asking him if he wanted to go to a family party at Joanne's house. Jonathan had far too much to drink and became more and more angry and volatile, culminating in him assaulting someone. Liam was still determined to be there for Jonathan and showcase the same deep loyalty that he showed to all his friends. When he was 17, got news that changed everything. His partner was expecting a baby. Liam was elated, excited to become a father and throw himself into the challenges and joys of parenthood that awaited him. Reese said that Liam was over the moon. With impending fatherhood, Liam continued to mature, and knowing that it was going to be a monumental change in his life, he began to see his friends less as he prepared to meet his new baby. On the 18th of July, 2019, Liam and his partner of 3 years welcomed their first child, a baby girl. Life was good and Liam was happy. August 1st, 2019, it was a bright and beautiful summer's day in Mansfield. On the August 2nd, Liam and his partner were moving to Birmingham with their baby to start their next chapter as a family. Whilst his family were going to miss him and were sad he was moving away, they supported him and he was ready to take the leap. He decided to spend his last day in Mansfield with his 2 closest friends. Liam, Jonathan, and Reese were seen going into a local shop to purchase alcohol before going back to Pop's house on Gladstone Street. They sat in the garden and drank and filmed a series of Snapchat videos whilst there. Liam asked Jonathan if he was going to change out of his tracksuit bottoms to make himself look a bit smarter, as he wasn't yet 18 and he didn't want him to draw attention to himself. Liam said he could wear a pair of his jeans if he wanted to, and after Jonathan got changed, the 3 of them headed off to a nearby pub. As they were walking through the park, received a message. It was from Jonathan's sister's boyfriend, the contents of which are not clear, but it sparked an argument. Reese showed the message to the other two, and Liam claimed he would hit the male who had sent the message in an attempt to stick up for Jonathan's sister. Jonathan grew incredibly angry, and the argument continued to escalate. As the situation got worse, Liam told him if he was going to keep behaving like that, he needed to go away and leave the jeans back at the house. After Jonathan had gone, Liam wanted to try and de-escalate the situation and not have his last day ruined. So they agreed to go back to the house to get Jonathan and try and salvage the rest of the day. When Jonathan arrived at the house, Pops was there in the living room. Liam and Reese got back just 4 minutes later, and Liam was keen to try and resolve the argument. Reese waited outside. Roughly a minute later, Jonathan came running out of the house, telling Reese, "I've stabbed him." Jonathan then ran away. Reese immediately went inside, unsure as to whether or not it was all just hot air, or if he had actually hurt Liam. When Reese went inside, he found Liam in the dining room. He was bleeding profusely from his chest and holding tea towels there to try and stop it before asking for the emergency services. Reese called 999 and then gave the phone to Pops for him to talk to the operator. Liam then fell to the floor, and Pops tried his best to help him and administer aid, putting pressure on the wound to try and stop the bleed. When the paramedics arrived on scene, Reese ran out to meet them. They tried to stabilize him as much as possible and treat his injuries. The police were also dispatched, and when they got there, they put Reese into the back of their car. The news soon made it to Joe and that Pop's house had the emergency services outside and that Liam had been stabbed by Jonathan. Superintendent Kevin Broadhead would dispatch more officers as they needed to find Jonathan and find him quickly. They would soon get some important information. The police received a call from the owner of a local sandwich shop saying that Jonathan was climbing over the wall at the back of the shop. He told the owner that he had been involved in a serious incident and had acted in self-defense, lifting up his shirt and appearing to show injuries. The police immediately linked it to the stabbing of Liam and sent more officers over there to arrest Jonathan. At 3:15 p.m., Joanne and one of Liam's sisters arrived at the house on Gladstone Street. The crew were still there and still battling to save him. They'd had to cut his chest open and manually keep his heart going. The paramedics decided against taking him to hospital in the air ambulance, as this would have meant they could not work on him whilst in the air. So the decision was made to transport him to the hospital by road. Liam was then put into the back of the ambulance, and Joanne was taken to see him by an officer. She told him that she loved him as her beloved son fought for his life. He was then rushed to Queen's Medical Center in Nottingham. The police were still hunting for Jonathan Treadgold, who had run away from the sandwich shop. But then, another call came in. Person said he was at a house in Moundsfield where his mother was visiting a friend. He had told his mother and her friend that he had stabbed Liam and that Liam was dead. The arrest was caught on the police's body cam footage at 3:33 p.m. He told the officers that Liam had been the one to instigate it and had tried to stab him, and that he had acted in self-defense. He was arrested on suspicion of causing grievous bodily harm. Several hours after his arrest, he was breathalyzed, and even after the time that had passed, his blood alcohol level was still 3 times the legal drink-drive limit, so he had clearly consumed a significant amount of alcohol. After getting to the hospital, Liam was taken straight into open-heart surgery to try and save him. Despite the best efforts of the medical staff, and after an hour and a half of trying to keep him alive, Liam succumbed to his injuries and died. Liam's sister Paige would later say, "I just remember a doctor walking in with 2 nurses, and I knew then from the look on the doctor's face that Liam had passed. She ran out of the room and had a panic attack." Joanne said she knew in that moment too that he had gone and that her heart shattered. She tried to call her other daughter Madison, who initially didn't answer. When she answered the second call, she said it felt like a piece of her was now gone too. Madison collapsed, unable to process what was happening. Those in the community could not believe it and were in total shock, and many people shared tributes to him, talking about how he had impacted their lives and just how much he was going to be missed. Joanne thanked the local community for all of their support and love, saying, "A post-mortem revealed that Liam had no defensive wounds, and the pathologist determined that it had been a jabbing motion when he had been stabbed. The knife had pierced his heart." Despite initially being arrested on suspicion of grievous bodily harm, this was now a murder inquiry. The police began to go through the CCTV footage to piece together the events of that day and try and work out how this had all come to be. They watched the footage of them going into the shop and buying the alcohol. Nothing seemed unusual and everything looked fine. They were then caught walking down the road before stopping in the park. The park was not covered by CCTV cameras. In his interviews, Jonathan said he had fled the park in a hurry after the argument had broken out in order to get away from Liam. But the footage showed him walking and not running. Liam and Reese were seen on CCTV walking back too. Jonathan was interviewed again, where he now said although he had picked the knife up, he had done so in self-defense and that he had been waving it around to scare him off, and this was how Liam had been stabbed. But based on what Pops had seen when he witnessed the attack and what was known about Jonathan's past, including a conviction 6 weeks prior for assaulting his girlfriend, his version of events just was not stacking up. The CCTV footage showed Jonathan running from Gladstone Street just 1 minute after Liam had gone into the house. When police searched the house, they found the knife in the kitchen, covered in Liam's blood and Jonathan's fingerprints. Jonathan also alleged in his interviews that Liam had bullied and picked on him for years and showed scars on his body, saying Liam had caused them. But the investigation would reveal the truth. The police investigating Liam's death trawled through the various records of social services, and they determined that the healed scars on Jonathan's body had not been caused by Liam but were instead self-inflicted. There was nothing to substantiate his claims that Liam had bullied him or treated him badly. Superintendent Kevin Broadhead said he believed that Jonathan was jealous of Liam starting a new life with his family in Birmingham and beginning an exciting chapter, when his own life was so chaotic. Based on all of the evidence they had gathered, Jonathan Treadgold was charged with murder. On the 18th of August, a fundraising event was held to generate funds to pay for a funeral for Liam, raise money for his newborn baby, and donate to a charity tackling knife crime. A GoFundMe was also set up. When his funeral was held, hundreds of mourners lined the streets as his coffin, draped in a Liverpool Football Club flag, was taken into St. Peter and St. Paul's Church. Those following the coffin wore shirts with a photograph of Liam on them, with "Always loved, never forgotten, forever missed" written on them too. Liam's devastated grandfather, who had tried to save his life, paid tribute to him. "Liam, I'm missing you terribly. I tried so much to help you, and I lived that day every day. My best was not good enough, and I am so sorry. I hope you are happy with the angels. Love you forever." The reverend conducting the service told those in attendance, "We need to go away not remembering the manner of Liam's death and the tragedy that it is, but remember the gift of life he was to each and every one of you here. And we go away with the message, bin the knife. We want young people to grow up safe, to not have their lives taken or destroyed." The funeral was a reflection of just how loved Liam was, how much of an impact he had on those he knew. Because he was 17 when the stabbing took place, Jonathan Treadgold was tried as a child, something that greatly upset Joanne. On the 1st of November, he appeared in court and entered a plea of not guilty to the charge of murder. He was told his trial would begin the following year. Because of his not guilty plea, the defense requested a second postmortem to be carried out on Liam's body. Joanne said it was disgraceful that he was putting Liam's family through yet more pain and devastation with his not guilty plea. Also, due to his age, there was initially a ban on his name and identity being reported. The Mansfield Chad newspaper made an application for the restrictions to be lifted, and the judge remarked, and with that, Jonathan Treadgold was unmasked and named in the press. Throughout the trial, Liam's family wore shirts with his face on it, showing that no matter how painful it was going to be, they were going to be there for him and his memory. During the proceedings, Jonathan was disrespectful and disruptive in court. He wouldn't take to the stand, he wouldn't speak, and he would not give any reason as to why he had stabbed Liam, someone who had been a good and loyal friend, and really looked after him. Paige said that she could tell from the look on his face that he wasn't sorry for what he had done at all. The evidence put before the court painted a devastating picture. A young man, a new father, about to start a new chapter in his life, taken in a violent and disturbing attack. February 7, 2020. The jury returned their verdict. Jonathan Treadgold was unanimously found guilty and showed no emotion as the verdict was given. All he said was "sound." Shouts of yes could be heard from the public gallery as Liam's family were elated that he had been convicted of his murder. Outside the courts, Joanne read a statement on behalf of the family. "We will never see Liam again, hear his laugh, or see our phones flash with an incoming call from him. He was stolen from our lives. We'd like to thank everyone who tried to help and save Liam, and we appreciate everything they did." Monday, the 10th of February 2020. At Nottingham Crown Court, Jonathan Treadgold was sentenced to a minimum of 16 years in prison for the murder of Liam Gray. Just as Gregory Dixon said, "This was done in anger, drink, and spite, not in fear." The judge added that he could serve longer than 16 years, as it would be for the parole board to determine whether or not he was safe to be released, and if they deemed that he wasn't, then he would stay in custody. Following his sentencing, Joanne said, "I don't think it's long enough, but there's not much more to say. The The murder of Liam Gray was a senseless, tragic, and brutal one. Paige said she reminds his daughter of him every day, adding that she gets her personality from Liam. As she continues to grow up surrounded by the love of her family, the legacy of her beloved father will continue to live on through her. The tragedy of this case is best summed up by the words of his mother, Joanne. There are so many things that Liam never got to do. He hadn't learned to drive, been to college, got a stable job, got married, bought a house, or had the chance to parent his daughter and watch her grow up. We as a family have been robbed of watching him do all that too. Michaela Hall was born on the 7th of February, 1983 to her mother Julie. Michaela was an only child and she and her mother were inseparable. Julie worked hard as a single mother to give Michaela the best start in life and they spent all their time together. Michaela grew into a happy and confident young woman with a close group of friends with whom she enjoyed going out. Michaela would go on to marry a local Oxford man, but it would later fall apart and the pair would split. This was an extraordinarily difficult time for Michaela, trying to adjust to the end of the relationship. One of Michaela and Julie's favorite things to do would be to go on holiday to Turkey. During one of these trips, Julie met a man called Mehmet Sahin. Mehmet said he knew instantly that she was the one for him. After falling in love, the pair were wed in 2002, and Mehmet moved to the UK to live in Oxford with his wife and stepdaughter. In 2007, Michaela went to Turkey again. It was here that she met a waiter who worked at the resort, a man called Ensar Joel. They soon began a relationship and she quickly fell for him, returning to Turkey not long after to see him again. After coming back to the UK a couple of weeks later, Michaela found out she was pregnant. She was determined to make the relationship a success and couldn't wait to meet her baby. The pair had a long-distance relationship and she would travel to Turkey every few months to see Ensar. In 2008, they welcomed their first child, a daughter. Just a few weeks after the birth, she discovered she was pregnant again, and the couple had a baby boy the following year. Being a mother was everything to Michaela. Her friend described her son and daughter as being her right and left arm. Julie also adored her grandchildren and absolutely doted on them. After the births of their children, the true nature of Ensar's personality would start to come through. He exhibited extremely controlling and possessive behaviors. When she was in Turkey, he would tell her where she could and couldn't go, and what she could and couldn't do. Even when she went back to the UK, he would continue to control her despite him being in Turkey. Michaela wanted her children to have their father in their lives, and she wanted him to come to the UK so they could be together and try and make their relationship work. Being a working mother with 2 young children meant life was busy and money was tight for Michaela, but determined to make it work, she would spend a lot of money flying out to Turkey to see Ensar, sometimes taking the children with her and other times leaving them in the care of her mother. As Ensar did not like to share attention with the children, he would take advantage of how giving she was. Her finances would take a massive hit because of this. She would buy him gifts in the UK and send them out to him. According to those that knew the couple while he was still out in Turkey, his relationship with Michaela didn't matter to him, and he continued to have sexual relations with other women. The abuse in the relationship would start to escalate. When Michaela went out to Turkey with the children to see him, Julie had also gone, and she remained at the hotel to look after her grandchildren. Michaela and Ensar had returned in the early morning hours, and an argument broke out in the kitchen. As he began to raise his voice, Michaela told him to be quiet because the children were asleep and she did not want them to be woken up. Ensar then raised his fist and went to strike Michaela. Julie stepped in between them and tried to stop him, but he shoved her out of the way and then struck Michaela. Julie told friends that when she looked in his eyes, she thought he wanted to kill her. After having a bad feeling about him for so long, this incident only made Julie's hatred for him grow. Michaela continued to hold on to the hope that once he left Turkey and moved to the UK to settle with her and the children, that their relationship would start to get better, but more problems would arise. Ensar had absconded from Turkey's national service, and he was not allowed to move to the UK until he had completed this, and his visa was put on hold. Michaela spent significant amounts of money trying to go through various channels to help him. He finally agreed to take part in his national service. After it became clear that this was his only option and the only way he was going to get his visa. But this led to further problems. He blamed Michaela for having to do his national service, even though it was completely out of her control. In December 2010, as he was doing his national service, without warning and with no reason given, he ended his relationship with her. Michaela was devastated. She began talking to an ex from Turkey and decided to go out there to see him, but later said she had made a mistake in seeing the ex, adding that she should have been trying to patch things up with Ensar and make their relationship work. She returned to the UK and, in a panic, had her friends help her erase and remove any trace of her being in contact with her ex, knowing that if Ensar found out, he would likely explode. A few days later, Michaela received a call. It was Ensar. Acting like nothing had happened, they agreed to give their relationship another go. But her friends urged her to reconsider and not get back together with him. But she decided she was going to give it another go. In March 2011, she traveled to Turkey and the pair got married. Julie refused to go. Michaela had also not told her friends that they were getting married, with some finding out via Facebook when Julie posted a congratulatory message to the couple. Michaela flew back to Britain and began working to get her new husband a visa. However, he soon found out that she had previously gone back to Turkey to see her ex, and this enraged him. He would become even more verbally abusive when they spoke. This would often reduce her to tears, and her friends would also hear the verbal abuse, telling her that this was not normal behavior and he shouldn't be treating her that way. He continued to spam her phone with calls, even throughout the night, calling 26 times on one occasion in August 2011, leaving her feeling incredibly depressed, with a friend saying she was even contemplating suicide. Her friend told her she needed to turn her phone off. The following day, Michaela heard that his visa had been approved and was on his way to be delivered to him. The day after, Ensar Joel boarded a flight to the UK and left Turkey. He lived with Michaela and their children at Julie and Mehmet's house in Thame, Oxfordshire. The tensions would soon start to come to the surface. Julie's hatred of Ensar was reciprocated, with him loathing how close she was to her daughter. Other people in Michaela's life would see his deeply controlling and abusive nature, with him telling one of her friends that Michaela would always be his. His hatred for Julie and living in her house, coupled with his desire for revenge after finding out Michaela had met with an ex after he had ended their relationship without warning, began to boil away inside him. In a conversation with Mehmet, Ensar said he felt like killing Michaela, but Mehmet believed he was just saying things in anger, not actually meaning it. One morning, Michaela called one of her friends. She was extremely fearful and frightened, as Ensar had told her that if she returned home, he would cut her head off. Just 2 weeks after he arrived in England, a plane ticket was bought for him to go back to Turkey permanently. Michaela was devastated and begged him again for a final chance to make it work. As he was on his way to the airport, he decided to abandon the flight and return to the family home. On September 2nd, he slept with a woman from a local bar, again showing no interest in his wife or his marriage. The following day, September 3rd, Ensar slept with the woman again and also consumed a significant amount of alcohol, as well as missing his shift at the local Prizo restaurant. He then went to the takeaway that Mehmet worked at 1:15 a.m. on the morning of September 4th, and asked him if something were to happen to Michaela and Julie, what would happen to the children? Mehmet believed this was nothing more than the alcohol talking. At 2:10 a.m. Ensargil returned to Ayrton Court. Julie and a friend Casey were watching television in the living room while Michaela slept upstairs with their daughter in the room and their son in the room next door. Ensar headed into the kitchen and took a knife from one of the drawers before going upstairs. As he went into the bedroom where his wife and daughter slept, it was here that he launched a terrifying attack, stabbing Michaela repeatedly. Julie and Casey ran upstairs to see what the commotion was. When Julie got to the bedroom, she found Ensar straddling Michaela as he stabbed her in the neck. As she tried to pull him off of her, she slipped and fell onto the floor. Ensar then turned his attention to her, repeatedly stabbing her as he had done to Michaela. Casey was also stabbed 4 times, with one of the knife wounds missing her pulmonary vein by a matter of millimeters. Casey was able to escape the house and run, but Julie wasn't. As she tried to get to the door, she collapsed at the bottom of the stairs, the catastrophic blood loss making her unable to carry on. Ensargil then took their 3-year-old daughter and headed off into the night. After hearing the screams, a worried neighbor immediately called the police, and before long, emergency services were on scene. Casey was taken to John Radcliffe Hospital, where she would eventually make a recovery. Julie was found in a fetal position just inches away from the door. Michaela was found in the bedroom. The hunt was now on to find Ensar Joel. He was seen on CCTV walking down the streets, holding his infant daughter in his arms. He was still carrying the knife he had used in the murders, and his clothes had blood spatter on them. He walked to the pizza place where Mehmet worked and shouted, "No one believed me, but I've done it. I've butchered them both." He then put his daughter down on the ground and told Mehmet to take care of her. Mehmet did everything he could to comfort the shaking and traumatized little girl. whilst also calling 999. As he walked around, Ensar called his family in Turkey. Man was seen on CCTV footage walking up to him to ask him for a cigarette lighter, but he immediately walked away after seeing Ensar holding the knife. The CCTV also captured the moment Sargal was taken into custody by 2 police officers. He told the officers, "Yes, I killed them, but you don't know why." Senior investigating officer Detective Chief Inspector Joe Kidman would later praise the police officers who had arrested him as they were unarmed, saying they showed great bravery and composure. As he was being questioned, he complained about the blood on his clothes and showed little to no care about what he had just done. Just 3 hours before committing the murders, he sent a message to his cousin on Facebook saying, "Have a look, all the English papers will talk of me tomorrow. The crazy Turk wolf who covered London in blood. The knife is ready. You know I'm handy with a knife, good with knives." Postmortems were carried out on Julie and Michaela, and it was determined that most of the stab wounds had been to the chest and neck, leading to extensive blood loss. Julie was stabbed more than 50 times, and Michaela suffered more than 40 stab wounds. This had all happened in front of their 3-year-old daughter, with their 2-year-old son in the next room. Ensar Joel was charged with the murder of his wife and mother-in-law, and the attempted murder of Casey. He was scheduled to appear at Oxford Magistrates Court that Tuesday, and he entered a plea of not guilty to all charges. May 2012, it was now time for Ensar Gold to stand trial. His behavior was shocking. He was photographed going into court, grinning for the photographers. He laughed and smiled as he sat in the dock, showing no remorse or regret for taking the lives of 2 people and ruining the lives of so many others. He argued that he had been trapped in the marriage and that he didn't love Michaela, but his behavior had shown he was more than happy to string Michaela along if it meant he could benefit from it. When it came time for him to testify as to what had happened on the night of September 4th, he told the court that Julie had been the one to attack him and he had acted in self-defense, at one point taking a pen off of his interpreter and making a stabbing motion before the judge intervened and told him to give the pen back to the interpreter. He said that he had been unhappy in his marriage and that he had felt forced to marry Michaela. The argument that he had acted in self-defense did not stand up. The amount of stab wounds that Michaela and Julie had suffered went way beyond what a reasonable person could consider self-defense. The work done by the police and the prosecution blew his self-defense story apart. The scene of the crime, the blood pattern analysis, and the damage done to the furniture painted a very different picture that he had been the one to attack Michaela and Julie and not the other way around. Michaela and Julie's loved ones sat in the public gallery and cried as the CCTV footage of him walking through the town, still holding the knife, was played. The prosecution lawyer, Dafith Enoch, told the courtroom that the marriage between the pair had been an unhappy one, compounded by the fact that Ensar missed Turkey. But he added that neither one of these things could excuse or explain why he had done what he had done, something he called the senseless slaughter born out of premeditated, ruthless violence. Richard Ruck from the South Central Ambulance Service testified at the trial, saying he would never forget the look in Michaela's eyes, saying it was one of suffering and pain, a look he would take with him to the grave. Casey also testified, saying she had rushed upstairs with Julie after hearing the commotion. She added that testifying in court was the hardest thing she had ever had to do. May 31st, 2012. The jury returned their verdict. Ensar Joel was found guilty of the attempted murder of Casey and the murders of Julie and Michaela. He was sentenced to life in prison with 36 years for each murder and 12 for the charge of attempted murder, with these sentences running concurrently. The judge told him, "I have no doubt that you intended to kill your wife Michaela and your mother-in-law Julie. These brutal murders were planned and premeditated. You say you were unhappy here and didn't get on with your mother-in-law. I totally reject any suggestion that anything she said or did provides you with any mitigation. The pain and suffering you have caused to the family will plainly be long-lasting and with them for the remainder of their lives." Ensar nodded and smiled as the sentence was given. As he was led out of the dock, Ensar began to smile, laughing and pointing at himself as he mouthed, "Me, me, me." For the loved ones left behind, they said no sentence would ever be enough. Mehmet said, "I met Julie when I was 23 years old and I was so lucky to have 12 years with the one and only love of my life. I know that she loved me as much as I loved her." He also said that he was glad the jury had seen through what was being said about Julie during the trial and the way she had been characterized by the defense's case, with them arguing that she had been the one to instigate it. Following Ensar's conviction, Detective Chief Inspector Joe Kidman said, "In trying to evade responsibility for his crimes, Ensar Gol sought to attack the character of these 2 women he had murdered. This has only added to the terrible ordeal of the family, who have attended each day and listened to all the evidence. Despite their anguish, they have shown great dignity throughout. The devastation caused on the night of September 4th is difficult to comprehend. For the ones left behind, the pain is unimaginable. Mehmet said, "There's a great big void in my life now. 2 children are left without a grandma, a mother and a father. He took everything. I didn't know till then that they were my only reason to live, my only joy in life." On October 8, 1988, a tragic incident occurred at 16 Woodland Way in Greenville, South Carolina. Alice Hainsworth Ryan, a lung cancer patient who had recently completed a 3-day chemotherapy session, was found deceased in her kitchen. She had sustained multiple stab wounds. The distressing discovery was made by her daughter, Catherine Stribling, who noticed a shattered window pane near the back door, indicating that something was wrong. This heart-wrenching scene raised numerous inquiries. Who could be responsible for such a horrendous act? What motivated this inhumane crime? Greenville, South Carolina, a vibrant city with a population of over 70,000 according to the 2020 census, is renowned for its rich history and thriving art scene. It is a place where the charm of the past harmonizes with modern living, offering a plethora of recreational and historical sites. The community, known for its friendliness and diversity, contributes to a lively and welcoming atmosphere. Greenville stands out for its blend of urban conveniences and natural beauty, making it an attractive destination for both residents and visitors. However, like any city, Greenville faces its share of challenges, including a crime rate that is 81.53% higher than the national average. The resolution of the Alice Hainsworth Ryan cold case serves as a reminder of the city's ongoing efforts to address these issues. Alice Hainsworth Ryan, born into a prominent family on January 24, 1908, grew up in a world of privilege and prominence in Greenville. Her upbringing on Main Street, under the care of her father, Harry J. Hainsworth, and mother, Rhoda Livingston Hainsworth, profoundly influenced her life. Alice had an extensive network of connections. She was the sister of mill owner H.J. Hainsworth Jr. and had ties to notable figures such as Judge Clement Hainsworth and Greenville's Mayor Knox White. At the age of 80, Alice was a widow after her husband, Joseph Murray Ryan, passed away in 1950 when she was only 42 years old. Despite this loss, she remained a central figure in Greenville society, navigating much of her life alone. Alice's life was deeply intertwined with the city's history, as she had spent her entire married life in the Grand Woodland Way home near Cleveland Park. This was the very place where her life came to a tragic end. A mother of 3, Alice was known for her active participation in social events. She was a familiar face at civic gatherings, an alumna of Converse College and a member of the Greenville Country Club. Despite her affluent lifestyle, she preferred simplicity in her home life. Surprisingly, she opted not to have air conditioning installed, a decision that occasionally concerned her family, who also worried about the lack of security systems. However, those who were acquainted with her described her as a fearless individual. In late 1987, Alice was confronted with a new challenge, a diagnosis of lung cancer following a battle with pneumonia. She fought bravely against the illness until her unfortunate passing, enduring chemotherapy and its toll on her health. Her life, filled with connections and history, came to a tragic end in the place she had called home for so many years, leaving the community in shock and her family grappling with a profound loss. On that fateful Saturday, on October 8, 1988, Greenville experienced a clear sky, a departure from the usual humid haze of the southern summer. For 80-year-old Alice Ryan, this day brought a sense of relief as she left St. Francis Hospital after a challenging 2-night stay for her chemotherapy. Little did anyone know that it would be her final day. Alice's daughter, Catherine Stribling, had a routine plan for the day. She dropped her mother off at home around 2 p.m. after the hospital visit and then went out to get lunch for both of them. However, upon her return at 3:10 p.m., she was met with a disturbing sight. As she approached the back door of her mother's house, she noticed something alarming. The pane near the doorknob was shattered. Puzzled and perhaps a bit anxious, Catherine inserted her key and opened the door without even checking if it was locked. The scene that awaited her in the kitchen was both horrifying and surreal. The stillness of the room was broken by the sight of Alice, Catherine's mother, lying motionless on the floor. The peaceful atmosphere of their home was shattered, much like the broken window. Catherine's gaze was immediately drawn to the white silk turban, now stained with blood and a few feet away from her mother, leaving her bald head exposed, a stark reminder of her battle with cancer. Adding to the horror, Alice's brown trousers remained undisturbed while her pink turtleneck and brown sweater were in disarray, revealing numerous dark, ominous wounds on her abdomen. What started as a tranquil morning had quickly turned into a nightmare. The calmness of a mother returning home after treatment was brutally disrupted by a violent act, plunging a family into mourning and a community into disbelief. The discovery of Alice Hainsworth Ryan's lifeless body was not only a heartbreaking moment for her loved ones, but also a shocking event for the entire Greenville community. It marked the beginning of a perplexing unsolved case, a cold mystery that would haunt the city for years to come. The finding of Alice Hainsworth Ryan's body in her Greenville residence triggered a thorough and intense investigation by the local authorities. Upon arrival, the police immediately began probing into the details of this heinous crime. A crucial lead emerged when a black and yellow-handled flathead screwdriver, suspected to be the murder weapon, was located in a nearby ravine, close to where an abandoned car was also discovered. Intriguingly, the screwdriver yielded no fingerprints, complicating the investigative process. Furthermore, a blood-stained dish towel, similar to others found in Mrs. Ryan's kitchen, was unearthed, adding another layer of mystery to the case. The autopsy findings painted a grim picture. Alice Ryan, already weakened by her chemotherapy, displayed no signs of defensive wounds. There were no traces of hair or skin under her fingernails, indicating she had not put up a fight. She had succumbed to 4 fatal stab wounds to her back and abdomen, yet her body bore a total of 37 stab wounds. The brutality of the attack left the community reeling in shock and fear. The murder caused a sense of unease to spread throughout the neighborhood, prompting residents to take extra precautions. There was a sudden increase in calls to burglar alarm companies, as people became more vigilant about strangers and made it a routine to double-check locked doors. Crucial eyewitness account came from a 16-year-old girl who lived half a mile away from Mrs. Ryan's house. She attended Christchurch Episcopal School and reported seeing a white car speeding in reverse down Mrs. Ryan's driveway around the time of the murder. The car in police custody was recognized by her as the one she had almost collided with. Although she couldn't provide a detailed description of the driver, she remembered noticing dark hair. The investigation into Alice Ryan's murder became one of the largest in Greenville's history. The Greenville Police Department, along with state law enforcement division agents and an FBI agent, worked tirelessly on the case. They meticulously created a detailed profile of the potential perpetrator and interviewed approximately 300 individuals, including around 60 potential suspects. The evidence collected was extensive, consisting of 2 large cardboard boxes filled with incident reports, tape recordings, interview notes, and crime scene photos. The investigators were well aware of Alice Ryan's high-profile status as the widow of a wealthy textile executive and a member of one of Greenville's most prominent legal families. Additionally, Alice's family publicly offered a $10,000 reward for anyone who could provide information leading to the killer's identification. Despite the extensive investigation and pursued leads, every avenue explored ultimately reached a dead end. The case eventually went cold for several decades. However, in 2017, a breakthrough occurred, offering a glimmer of hope in the long-standing mystery surrounding the chilling murder of Alice Hainsworth Ryan. The persistence of the investigators led them to re-examine the evidence using fresh eyes and advanced technology. Their dedication paid off when they uncovered DNA evidence on one of the items initially gathered from the crime scene. This vital piece of evidence, belonging to an African-American male, had been carefully preserved over the years, awaiting advancements in forensic science. In November of 2017, the investigators submitted this DNA sample to the Combined DNA Index System. The relentless efforts of the law enforcement team were finally rewarded when they received notification of a match in the Combined DNA Index System database to a DNA profile. This was the breakthrough they had been eagerly anticipating, a major lead in a case that had remained unsolved for almost 30 years. The DNA profile led them to a 50-year-old man residing in Americus, Georgia. Further investigations and DNA testing confirmed his identity as Brian Keith Munns. This discovery marked a significant turning point in the investigation, transforming it from a cold case to a case with a concrete suspect. Born in 1968, Brian Keith Munns had a background that was largely unknown in terms of family details. However, his criminal record painted a troubling picture. In 1998, Munns faced charges for first-degree criminal sexual conduct. He ultimately pleaded guilty in 2001, resulting in a period of imprisonment that lasted until May of 2007. Upon his release, he was placed on probation, but this period of relative freedom was short-lived. Munz found himself back in prison in August of 2008 after his community supervision was revoked. Released on probation again in May of 2009, his freedom was once again short-lived. He violated the terms of his release by failing to register as a sex offender, leading to his community supervision being revoked once more in July of 2009. Munz completed his sentence and was released in October of 2009. This pattern of incarceration and release, coupled with the severity of his crimes, highlights a troubled history. On May 6, 2019, the Greenville Police Department made a significant announcement. Brian Keith Munz, who was 51 years old at the time and lived in Americus, Georgia, was apprehended in connection with the long-standing murder case of Alice Hainsworth Ryan. Greenville Police Chief Ken Miller disclosed that Munz had been taken into custody on February 15th. But this information was deliberately withheld to allow for further probing and interviews. Chief Miller justified the delayed announcement by stating that premature disclosure of Munz's arrest could have compromised the investigation, potentially impeding detectives' efforts to validate witness testimonies and gather more evidence. Subsequent to Munz's apprehension, detectives conducted an additional 30 interviews, which played a pivotal role in reconstructing the events leading to Ryan's demise. Notably, one of these interviews, provided by an acquaintance of Munz, offered detailed insights into the crime, shedding light on Munz's entry into Ryan's residence, the nature of the inflicted injuries, the chronological sequence of events. This crucial information led to the filing of supplementary charges against Munz. The culmination of a meticulous 29-month reinvestigation involving the Cold Case Unit, active detectives, and a state law enforcement division agent resulted in Munz's arrest. Chief Miller commended the dedication and hard work of all parties involved, including prosecutors who ensured that the case was handled in a manner conducive to successful prosecution. However, a new development emerged following Munz's arrest. He confessed to being present in Ryan's vehicle with Lamar Green on the day of the murder. Munz shifted the blame onto Green, alleging that Green was the one responsible for Ryan's death and attempted to sell him the car afterward. Interestingly, Lamar Green had been a suspect from the outset, but was killed in an incident deemed justifiable homicide, effectively closing his chapter in the investigation. Despite the initial charges, Munz eventually pleaded guilty to the offense of failing to report the crime to law enforcement. In September 2021, he received a 4-year sentence with credit for time served, and the remaining charges were dismissed. After a prolonged period of uncertainty and sorrow, Alice Hainsworth Ryan's family was able to find some semblance of closure regarding her tragic passing. Kyoto. Once the capital of Japan, is home to 17 World Cultural Heritage Sites and has long been a favorite destination for tourists, expats, and backpackers from all over the globe. Famous for its stunning ancient temples like the Golden Kinkakuji and the magical Kayamizudela, it is also world-renowned for its charming winding streets and serene gardens. As the cultural heart of Japan, Kyoto is the last place anyone would expect a mass murder to occur. However, on a humid, overcast morning on the 18th of July 2019, one man's quest for revenge over a perceived act of plagiarism would shock the world and take the lives of 36 people, causing serious injuries to a further 34, making it the deadliest attack on Japanese soil since the end of the Second World War. With the likes of Studio Ghibli's Spirited Away and My Neighbor Totoro, as well as many other cult favorites such as Sailor Moon and Gundam, anime is a $2 billion industry and has long been a key aspect of Japanese culture, enjoyed by children and adults alike from all over the world. Kyoto Animation, known as KyoAni to its scores of loyal fans, started life as a small and humble animation studio first established in 1981 by charismatic husband and wife team Hideaki and Yoko Hata. The Hatas began their studio by recruiting unemployed mothers and other inexperienced workers who would ordinarily not be given a chance. Yoko Hata, talking to a journalist at the time, stated, "Women have an innate power of being kind and gentle. So we hire more female staff because we also want our animation to be filled with that heartwarming power." This kind of sentiment alone made KyoAni stand out from the crowd and immediately won the hearts of so many within the anime community. In the following years, the studio grew in size and gained widespread popularity across Japan for its production of high-quality anime movies and for its skills in storytelling, producing over 28 television shows and films between the years 2003 and 2019. Many of the studio's productions became instant classics, such as the series The Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya, an animation series about the adventures of a supernatural high school girl, Clannad, a fantasy drama, and K-On!, a series following the lives of 4 high school girls. The studio was a creative's dream workplace as well, and positions that were highly sought after by other artists and writers alike. Not only for the chance to work at a successful and popular studio, but also due to the fact that Hideaki and Yoko were very kind employers, with a vision to support artists fully. They paid a generous full-time salary to staff where other animation studios tended to only pay artists and writers on a freelance basis. They also offered an array of training opportunities within the studio, as both Yoko and Hideaki believed from the beginning in fostering artistic talent wherever they found it. One way in which the studio discovered new talent and up-and-coming artists was by running the annual Animation Awards competition, a yearly cash prize contest open to professional and amateur writers alike, and offering the chance for lucky winners to have their stories published and adopted by the studio. Unbeknownst to Hideaki and Yoko Hata and others at KyoAni, it would be the same competition that would spark a hatred so deep in one man and flame his obsession with revenge, culminating in one appalling act of violence. The morning of Thursday, the 18th of July started pretty typically for the employees of the KyoAni Studio 1 building. The day, though overcast, was already growing humid, and the cicadas could be heard buzzing continuously in the trees jotted along the roads, leading to the busy Rokujuzo train station in the residential area of Fushimi, where Studio 1 was located. From the outside, Studio 1, the animation company's main base of operations, was just an ordinary-looking old-fashioned and simple three-story building, connected by a single iron spiral staircase. But the inside was very much different. The interior had a buzzing but very relaxed and creative atmosphere. Tatami mats were laid out on the floors, as is Japanese custom in the home. Employees walked around barefoot or in slippers. There was even a space in the corner of the second floor for taking a nap if artists wanted to catch up on sleep after lunch. The Hatas always wanted their company to have a family feeling to it, and Studio 1 was a testament to that. Around 70 artists, writers and animators were gearing up for another hectic day of creating whilst chatting and laughing about their plans for the weekend. Amongst them was 22-year-old Yuka Kusama and 23-year-old illustrator Yuki Amora, who had both only just recently joined the studio after graduating from university. Yuka's mother would later say about her daughter that her dream since she was a young child was to go into the animation industry. At around 10:30 a.m., a disheveled and heavy-set man wearing spectacles, a sweat-stained red t-shirt and dirty stone-washed jeans burst through the front doors of the studio carrying a 40-liter liquid container and shouting, "Die, die, die." The man then began frantically splashing gasoline around the entrance, hallway and overshocked studio employees who attempted to stop him. A desperate struggle ensued, but the man pulled out a lighter and ignited the fuel, causing what many witnesses recalled as a large flash and explosion. A middle-aged man who was working at a housing exhibition near the studio at the time told reporters after, "I was in the office around 10:30 and suddenly I heard an explosion. When I went outside I heard another large explosion. I could see there were flames and smoke mainly on the second and third floors of the studio, and some people were evacuating. The smoke was rising quickly and it was really thick, so I immediately called the fire department." Engulfed in flames, the culprit fled screaming from the building where he was pursued by two studio employees, and with the aid of police officers later, he was wrestled to the ground in a courtyard around 100 meters away. As the badly burnt man struggled with police, he repetitively shouted, "They plagiarized my work. I did it because they stole my novel," and he demanded to speak to the president of the studio. Police restrained the man who had severe burns on his legs, chest and face until backup arrived. Officers also discovered knives and bladed weapons concealed in a bag near the studio that belonged to him too. Due to the very common occurrence of earthquakes in Japan, the vast majority of smaller buildings, such as the three-story Kyoto Animation Studio 1 building, are constructed with wooden frames which can cause fires to spread with chilling ease. Heartbreakingly, this would also prove to be the case with KyoAni, which due to its designation as a small business building, also lacked sprinklers and fire extinguishers throughout its premises. The flames spread and grew ferociously within seconds, trapping most of the terrified employees, including Yuka and Yuki, inside the building and forcing them up the single spiral staircase to the smoke-engulfed second and third floors, where many of them collapsed due to suffocation or succumbed to the flames and died. Firefighters would later state that the fire had grown to the unbelievable temperature of 957 degrees Fahrenheit. Bystanders on the street outside could only watch helplessly in horror as screams and shouts drifted from the building, which was now submerged in smoke. The extreme heat and toxic fumes drove many of them back as they desperately awaited for the fire brigade to arrive on scene. 81-year-old Ken Okamura, who lived close to the studio, told reporters the next day that he saw several women jump from the burning building's second floor. They were so badly burned that blood was coming from their noses and all of their clothes, but their underwear were gone, he said. Another witness was 74-year-old Hatsumi Yamashita, who taught dance at the local community center, where many of the injured were brought to receive immediate emergency treatment. The dance teacher told reporters she thought one of the girls was wearing a jet black outfit. However, when she looked closer, she realized to her horror that when the girl laid down on the floor, she was so burned that she was almost naked. "I could never forget this young woman," Ms. Yamashita said. On this tragic morning, the studio president Hideaki wasn't at Studio One. He had been preparing for an interview with a major Japanese television channel about some animation work that they had created for the 2020 Tokyo Summer Paralympics across the city at Studio 5. It was just as the interview was coming to a close at around 10:33 that he received a call from one of his employees, informing him that there was a fire at Studio One. He later stated he wasn't overly concerned at the time. The member of staff who had called him didn't seem alarmed, and Hideaki wrongly assumed one of the animators had set up a fire alarm, or that there had been a small confined fire in the staff kitchen. He brushed off the call and continued his morning as usual, making preparations for an early afternoon business meeting at Studio One, telling himself he would find out soon enough what had been the cause of the telephone call. It would only be a short while later, as he was driving towards Studio One, that he noticed the thick black smoke and heard the wailing sirens. He began to worry. He called his wife Yoko on her cell phone. He knew she wasn't scheduled to be at Studio One that day, but was relieved to know that she was safe, though she also didn't know what was happening. Unable to progress further in his car due to the firefighters blocking off the streets, the 69-year-old CEO parked quickly on a side street and ran towards the billowing clouds of smoke, and the studio that he and his wife had dedicated their entire lives to building up. As soon as he got to the scene and saw the scale of the fire, he knew there was nothing he could do. He stumbled upon a small group of his employees sprawled out on the ground in an alley, coughing and crying, their clothes and skin black with smoke. He asked them what had happened, and when no one could really answer, he fell to his knees and embraced them. He would spend the rest of the day at the scene unwilling to leave, trying to help and console his surviving employees in any way that he could, trying to understand what had happened. For the husband and wife team of Hideaki and Yoko Hata, life and their beloved studio would never be the same again. The fire would rage for 5 hours, until 30 fire engines and countless brave firefighters managed to get the blaze under control and then finally extinguish it at approximately 6:20 a.m. the following morning. The atrocity would instantly claim the lives of 34 people, 20 of them women and 14 of them men, with 2 more victims later dying in hospital from their injuries. Tragically, the firefighters would discover many of the dead on the spiral staircase leading up to the roof. Their bodies so badly burned they could only be identified by DNA testing. In the coming days, all that would remain of Kyoto Animation Studio 1 building was a charred and destroyed shell. Piles of flowers gathered at the site by the hour, and it would remain a shrine to the dead until it was formally demolished on the 28th of April, 2020. People across Japan and the world were heartbroken and disgusted by this attack. Every person who heard the awful news had 2 simple questions. Who would do something like this, and why? In 2019, 41-year-old Shinji Aoba had been out of prison for 3 years after a 6-year sentence for robbing a convenience store with a kitchen knife in 2012, and was now living in a single-occupancy apartment in a suburban area just outside of the north of Tokyo and over a 7-hour drive from Kyoto. Always a deeply troubled individual, Aoba had grown increasingly isolated and volatile since the death of his father from suicide in 2009. He had cut off all contact with his family and fought with his neighbors, and had previously received warnings from police for stealing a woman's underwear from her washing line, and for making threats to people living in and around the same single-occupancy building he resided in. People often saw him skulking around the neighborhood late at night on his bicycle, always unwashed and always wearing the same clothes. Most avoided him as much as possible. In the days following the arson massacre, a neighbor living on the floor above Alba's told reporters anonymously that he was relaxing in his apartment a few weeks before the attack, when he heard a furious banging from the outside and someone trying to get into his home. When the neighbor tentatively opened the front door, a disheveled and sweating man he recognized as the troubled Alba were standing there. When the neighbor asked what he wanted, Alba attacked him, shouting, "I will kill you." The attack was completely unprovoked, and the shocked and frightened neighbor quickly locked himself in the apartment and later reported it to the police. It was just one of many such incidences reported to the local police in the months and weeks leading up to the massacre. A 37-year-old woman who lived across the street from Alba's building later stated to journalists that she frequently saw the police and ambulance crews attending disturbances at his apartment, where loud music was often played through open windows to the annoyance of many. It seemed to everyone who had witnessed Alba's behavior that he was very unstable and could be violently triggered by the smallest of things. It would only be a matter of time before something pushed him over the edge completely. Unbeknownst to everybody, Alba's fuse had been lit the year previously. On November 18, 2018, Alba was sat in his apartment watching anime, which he now did with the majority of his time. He didn't have any friends or hobbies, and anime and video games had become his only remaining connections to society, people, and real life. On this day in particular, he was watching the 5th episode of the popular KyoAni series, named Surun, an animation about a group of high school boys in the archery club, trying to make it to the national tournament, whilst also overcoming other life problems. This episode would infuriate Alba, sending him into a dark and bitter rage. In the episode of Surnei, there was a brief scene where the anime's protagonist buy meat that is discounted because it is past its sell-by date. Alba glared at the television, unable to believe what he was watching. He had written the same exact scene where a protagonist buys discounted meat that is past its sell-by date, and had written it in a novel he'd submitted to KyoAni's annual animation awards competition in the years previously. The fact that the coincidental scene was a very minor and completely inconsequential one was utterly lost on Alba. He became fixated on the idea that KyoAni had rejected his submission and then they had stolen his idea, plagiarizing his work and ripping off his novel. Alba became obsessed. It was in this same period of time that the studio received a deluge of anonymous death threats by email that numbered in the hundreds, and the police had been called in to patrol the main studios for a brief time. The emails could never be tracked down by the authorities due to the author using a particular software that blocked all tracing attempts. The police patrols gradually decreased as the death threats ceased. It would only be after the massacre and apprehension of the killer that the death threats and ALBA would be linked, though not ever concretely proven. 4 days before the Studio One massacre, a 27-year-old company employee, who later gave his name to the media simply as Matsumoto, was lying on the sofa in his apartment watching a sports livestream on YouTube, when the person in the apartment above his started banging on the floor. Assuming the upstairs neighbor was assembling furniture or rearranging their apartment, Matsumoto simply turned up the volume on his sports game and tried to ignore the noise. However, it was only moments later that the neighbor in the apartment next to his started violently thumping on the wall. This caused a chill to run down his spine, as the neighbor now seemingly attacking the shared wall was the neighbor from hell, Shinji Aoba. Matsumoto had been living next door to Aoba for a couple of years, and was scared of him, stating he always was noisy, dirty, and rude, as well as being known for violence. He said he smelled terrible, really bad. I'm sure restaurants wouldn't let him in because of the way he smelled. When Alba started beating on his front door, Matsumoto attempted to ignore it. But when Alba returned to his apartment and started throwing objects against the wall, Matsumoto decided to try and talk to him. He went outside into the corridor and knocked on Alba's front door. When there was no answer, he shouted through the letterbox that it wasn't him making all the loud noises, but an upstairs neighbor. The door suddenly opened and out came Alba, grabbing the younger, smaller man by the throat and hair, shouting, "You're too loud. Shut up. I'm going to kill you." When Matsumoto again tried to explain to the enraged Alba that the noises hadn't come from his apartment, but the one upstairs, Alba screamed in his face, "It's irrelevant. You're annoying. I'll kill you. I have nothing to lose." Shaken, Matsumoto fled the building to the nearest police station to report the incident. But when police finally arrived at Alba's apartment to talk to him, he had seemingly gone missing. Matsumoto would later go on to state that Alba's eyes had looked, quote, insane that night. The following day, Alba was witnessed riding the high-speed bullet train from Saitama to Kyoto, where he checked into a cheap motel in a downtown area situated close to many popular tourist destinations and night spots. In the days leading up to the mass murder, still wearing the same bright red t-shirt and stonewashed jeans he had been wearing the night of the confrontation with his neighbor Matsumoto, Alba was witnessed by locals and captured on CCTV numerous times in the proximity of the Studio One building. On Wednesday, the day before the attack, Alba strolled into a hardware store and purchased a 4-wheeled push trolley. That afternoon, he pushed the trolley over 6 miles to a gas station where he filled up 2 red plastic containers with over 10 gallons of gasoline. He then loaded the containers onto the trolley, paid for the gas, and wheeled the trolley towards a disused and abandoned child's play area situated underneath a motorway underpass. It was here, in this lonely and deserted area, that he concealed the gas containers that he would use in the appalling attack the very next day. A day that would change the lives of everyone involved, and change Japan forever. Confusion was rife in the hours and days following the attack. Friends and family tried desperately to reach loved ones who worked in the Studio One building, Authorities published lists of survivors and staff members who had been taken to nearby hospitals, and many family members were left bereft when they couldn't find the names of their loved ones on the hospital admissions or on the lists released to the media. 69-year-old Kazuo Okada, whose granddaughter Megumi Ono worked in Studio One and who hadn't been accounted for, told television reporters on the day of the fire that Megumi was my pride. Her name started appearing on the screens of anime movies. I was so happy to see that. I was proud of her. I want to see her face soon. It wouldn't be until over a week later that 21-year-old Megumi's fate would be conclusively determined through DNA analysis. Tragically, she had been another victim. As Japan mourned, new laws were passed making it more difficult to purchase large amounts of gasoline in plastic containers. And buyers now have to give their full details and an explanation for the purchase, which is all kept on record. Kind fans and supporters from across Japan and the rest of the globe came together making charitable donations to a GoFundMe for the studio, raising over $2.3 million for the victims and their families. A large majority of survivors returned to work as soon as they were able to, going back to the jobs they loved, continuing to create the animation that brought so much joy to so many people and honoring the memories of their friends and coworkers who had passed away. Upon hearing that the motive for the mass murder was revenge over a perceived act of plagiarism, the Hatters and staff members went back over past competition entries and did in fact find a submission from ALBA, but it in no way resembled the scene that sent him over the edge, and had no similarities whatsoever to any scenes from any of the other studio's many works. Following the attack, he was taken by police guard to the intensive care unit at the hospital. He continuously admitted to setting the blaze as an act of revenge, telling the detectives, "I lit the fire because Kiyoani stole my novel." He also told police and hospital staff that he expected to get the death penalty, suffering from severe burns to most of his body. He soon lost the ability to speak and could only breathe with the aid of a respirator. He also received multiple skin grafts, and police waited until he was healthy enough to be arrested and charged. That day finally came, on the 27th of May 2020. Almost a year after the attack, Aoba was still recovering in a Kyoto hospital from experimental artificial skin grafts, but he was judged fit enough to be finally arrested on suspicion of murder and arson. He was officially indicted on the 16th of December 2020. It is highly likely he will spend the rest of his life in prison and escape the death penalty. So many mothers, daughters, fathers, and sons were stolen in the cruelest of ways from their loved ones on awful summer day in July 2019. However, their creativity, love, hope, and talent will never be forgotten and will live on in their animation work forever. Nancy Mitchell and her husband Joe managed the Beach Motor in near Lake Ontario in Hamilton, Ontario. On the evening of October 17, 1990, Joe was flipping through the channels on the motel's television when he stopped on a program called Unsolved Mysteries, a show he had never seen before. A photograph of a woman appeared on the screen, and Joe was shocked to realize he recognized her. He called Nancy over, and without any prompting, she immediately identified the woman as well. Then, a picture of a man appeared, and the Mitchells recognized him too. He was the man staying with the woman they had just seen. According to the program, the couple was wanted by the police. They had checked into the motel under the names Mr. and Mrs. Fred Smith and had been staying in room 12 since September 10th. Despite the fact that the couple rarely left their room, Nancy and Joe were not particularly fond of them. Personally, I didn't like them. There was something about them, Nancy later told the Baltimore Evening Sun. Joe had difficulty getting them to pay for their room each week, and they were a week behind on their payments. Nancy and Joe called the authorities immediately, and an emergency response team was quickly dispatched to the motel. When they entered room 12, however, no one was there and the room had apparently been abandoned. Witnesses were quickly located, who reported seeing the couple getting into a taxi. After contacting local taxi services, authorities located a driver who reported taking the couple to the Red Rose Motel, roughly 6 miles away. The couple was apprehended by authorities at their room there at 3:20 a.m. on October 18th, just hours after Joe and Nancy Mitchell saw them on television during the first broadcast of the episode of Unsolved Mysteries that featured them. They did not know that they had been on the show and said that the timing of their departure from the Beach Motor Inn had been purely coincidental. It may have had something to do with the $140 they owed the motel. The couple was 46-year-old Sandra K. Beeman and 30-year-old Edgar Eugene Kearns. They were wanted by police because Edgar had recently escaped from Allegheny County Jail in Cumberland, Maryland, where he had been one of just 2 maximum security prisoners, and Kay Beeman had been a correctional officer. Kay was a former beautician who had worked at the jail since 1980 and worked the midnight to 8 a.m. shift. On August 29, 1990, at 2:27 a.m., Edgar Kearns had entered the office where Correctional Officer Michelle Pedribres had been reviewing medical charts. There were 2 other guards on shift with her at the time. One of them had gone out for the shift's nightly snack run at a nearby convenience store, and the other, Kay Beeman, was out on patrol making the routine inmate verification. Edgar had a hard object inside of a sock in his hand, and Michelle feared it was a weapon. He told her she would be coming with him, but she was able to run into a nearby employee bathroom and lock the door. She soon heard a series of noises at the door controls that indicated that someone had left the jail. One inmate had not been in his cell at the time because he had been allowed to study for his upcoming GED exam at a counter near where Michelle had been stationed. He knocked on the bathroom door and let Michelle know that he had seen Edgar and his cellmate, James Barnes, leave the prison. He also said that they had taken Kay Beeman with them and that James's arm had been around her neck as though she was being taken against her will. Michelle immediately notified the sheriff's office of the escape. While it was initially assumed that Kay Beeman had been taken by the 2 escaping prisoners as a hostage, it quickly became obvious that she had actually participated in the escape. Kay called her 21-year-old daughter shortly after the escape, telling her that she was safe and that she was with one of the escaped inmates. The theory would be confirmed on September 2nd, 4 days after the escape, when James Barnes was apprehended in his hometown in West Virginia. He informed authorities that Kay had in fact aided in the escape. She had smuggled hacksaw blades into the facility so that the 2 prisoners could exit their cell by sawing through the bars. But when this did not work, Kay had to let them out of the cell using her keys. James also told authorities that Kay had participated in the escape because she was in a romantic relationship with Edgar Kearns. This would not be the first relationship Kay had with an inmate. By her own admission, she had dated 2 men she met while they were being held at the jail. She had also been set to marry a man she met while he was an inmate just 4 days before the escape. Kay had first met 33-year-old Thomas Bowman while he was being held in the Allegheny County Jail in 1989 on a breaking and entering church and developed a romantic relationship with him. He was transferred to the Maryland Correctional Institution at Hagerstown that November. But Kay wrote letters to him and visited him there twice a week without fail. They planned to marry on August 25, 1990. Kay obtained a copy of Thomas's birth certificate so they could be issued a marriage license and purchased their wedding bands while Thomas made arrangements for a minister and with the prison for the ceremony. However, Kay never showed up for her wedding. It took some time for Thomas to get a hold of her over the phone. But when he finally did, she told him that she no longer wanted to have anything to do with him. She would claim after her arrest that she had only agreed to marry Thomas out of sympathy. "I love this woman," Thomas would later tell the Baltimore Sun. "This had been the first woman who stuck by me. She met me in jail and stuck with me. I still love her, and that's the worst part about it." According to her friends and family, Kay had been greatly unhappy with her life. While Kay had no criminal record, at least one of her friends was surprised that the chronically unhappy Kay had seized an opportunity to run away and leave everything she had behind. Kay was divorced and lived with her 2 adult children, neither of whom she got along with, in a mobile home. She struggled to stay current on her bills and was resentful of the sheriff's office with which she worked closely. Just before the escape, Kay told a friend that it would not be long before she was free. The friend did not understand what she meant until she heard about the prison break. Authorities in Canada had Kay and Edgar deported, and they were driven from Buffalo, New York back to Maryland. According to the officers who made the drive with them, the couple did appear to genuinely have feelings for one another, and they laughed and giggled for most of the drive. Kay and Edgar appeared in district court on October 30th and were as physically affectionate as they could be, given their restraints, in front of the waiting reporters, kissing several times for the cameras. In an interview with the Cumberland Times-News, Kay claimed that she and Edgar were working to obtain a marriage license and that they were hoping to have a child together. Given the fact that neither of them had any qualms about running away, both Kay and Edgar were denied bail. Following a bail review hearing, Kay was granted bail, but it was set at half a $1 million, which she could not post. Kay was initially held at her former place of employment, but was transferred to another facility to avoid making her former co-workers uncomfortable. James Barnes was sentenced to 8 years for the escape and related charges, which he will not begin serving until after he completes a 50-year prison term in Virginia for rape and kidnapping. Edgar Kearns was sentenced to 6 years of the charges he faced in Allegheny County for writing bad checks and faced similar charges in Virginia, in addition to the charges that stemmed from the escape. He had previously been charged with the attempted murder and kidnapping of his former girlfriend and her daughter, but those charges were dropped when the girlfriend decided not to testify. Kay Beeman entered an Alford plea to the charges against her on March 27, 1991, and sentenced to 10 years, with half of that sentence to be suspended. Subsequent hearings of Unsolved Mysteries state in an update that after they were both released from custody, Kay and Edgar lived together until Kay's death in 2002. But no mention of Edgar is made in her obituary. Kay passed away on January 23, 2002, following a long illness at a hospital in Ocala, Florida, where she had moved a year earlier to live with her sister.